As always, a lot going on here, so I do want to get right into the headlines. Take a look right here at this image that we do have coming in over Khan Yunis. This is a shot that we have shown you a lot over the past several months. Now, President Trump has sent a letter to Iran's supreme leader seeking a new deal to restrain Tehran's nuclear program, warning that otherwise military intervention might be necessary. Want to pop up this quote for you right here on your screen so you can get a better look at it. It does come from a Fox News interview that will air tomorrow. Trump says, quote, "I've written them a letter saying I hope you're going to negotiate because if we have to go in militarily, it's going to be a terrible thing." Speaking to reporters from the Oval Office Friday, the commander-in-chief did say that, quote, "We have a situation with Iran that something's going to happen very soon, very, very soon." Now, there's been no direct confirmation from Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei's office as to whether it received the letter, but there are questions about how the 85-year-old will react. Both Israel and the U.S. have warned that they will never let Iran acquire a nuclear weapon. All of this as negotiations appear to possibly stall for the next phase of a ceasefire deal between Israel and the Hamas terror group. As always, so much to discuss here, so I do want to bring in an expert to help break it down. We do have Asher Westrop Evans, a Middle East expert, currently with the Israeli Citizen Spokesperson's Office. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us this morning.
An absolute pleasure.
All right, so first off, I do want to ask you overall about this letter that President Trump has sent over to Ali Khamenei, of course, the supreme leader of Iran. What do you make of all of that overall, and what does Israel likely think of that?
Look, a key thing to remember here, as you said in your preamble there, is that it is critical that the Iranian regime not be allowed to break out to full nuclear capability. And under current frameworks and suggestions, reports suggest that we are talking about a matter of weeks now when it comes to breakout capabilities. The amount of nuclear fissile material that Iran has access to means it is simply, some estimates say, as low as 1 to 2 weeks away from the potential for full nuclear breakout capability. It cannot be allowed to reach that level. Because as we've seen in the past, in just over the last 12 months, we've already seen multiple attacks by the Iranian regime where they sent masses, hundreds of ballistic missiles towards Israel in the past. And if that were to be combined with the nuclear capability, well, we can only imagine the utter devastation and results that could be wrought across the Middle East and frankly, well beyond. So, US President Trump's letter certainly, keeping up the pressure on the Iranian regime and keeping up the understanding for Khamenei and others in Iran that the US is taking this threat seriously. It is allied with Israel and will stand as a united front against any attempt for Iran to break out to full nuclear capability.
As we talk about the ceasefire deal that exists between Israel and the Hamas terror group, do we know where those talks do stand on either extending phase 1 or possibly moving into phase 2? Because it almost appears as if, once again, they have kind of stalled.
Yes, unfortunately, they have most certainly stalled. That is really the situation in which we find ourselves at the moment. As of last Saturday, the official length and duration of the phase 1 deal was completed, as it was. The hostage handover, the ransom deal, as it were, of Israeli hostages in exchange for Palestinian prisoners, murderers, and the like, was completed, but getting to this phase 2 deal has remained elusive. Israel at the moment is ratcheting up the pressure, putting on all sorts of economic sanctions, halting aid, potentially halting certain infrastructure elements, water, electricity elements to put pressure on the Hamas terror regime and let them know that this is serious and they need to come to the negotiating table. Whether we return to full-scale war and actions, Israel is certainly at the ready. And the US has indicated via US President Trump and others, Steve Witkoff, of course, his US special envoy here in the Middle East, that they are willing to support Israel. The US is willing to support Israel in whatever action is needed to get the hostages back, to bring our people back home, and to help dismantle and remove Hamas from power, which has always been the stated goal here and must be completed if Israel is able to come out of this war, getting past this horrendous status quo under which we've all lived since October 7th, 2023.
One headline that was made several days ago, we learned from President Trump and other U.S. officials that the U.S. has had direct contact with the Hamas terror group when it comes to negotiations about a possible ceasefire, but also releasing some of the hostages, if not all of them. This has been kind of described as a quote unquote secret meeting. What do you think those conversations, what sort of impact do they have on Israel? And how does Israeli leadership feel about the U.S. speaking directly with Hamas?
Look, there are reports, coming out of these sort of direct conversations between the U.S. and Hamas. At this point, I think the key message that we all need to remember here is that the U.S. and Israel are key and critical allies, that they must work together to keep the pressure on Hamas and represent a united front against the sort of terror regime that is Hamas and, of course, their puppet masters in Tehran, in the Iranian regime there, to make sure that they all understand that the hostages must be returned, all of them, as soon as possible. Now, they must be brought home now, must be let go now, in order to ensure that we're able to move forward, that we're able to, get past this war, to help, begin any sort of next stage when it comes to not, of course, just Israel's people, but also the people of Gaza. If they want to come out from under the yoke of Hamas and their brutal terror regime, they must keep that pressure on and make sure that Hamas understands that they do not have a future. They do not have a future in power, and they do not have a future by holding Israelis, whether they be alive or, unfortunately, at this stage, no longer alive and no longer with us. They must be returned incomplete. That's just the key message that we have to take away here.
One other headline here, U.S. Special Envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, we kind of discussed this already, but says that the U.S. and Israel can actually take joint military action against Hamas if these negotiations fail. So is that just kind of a threat, or is that a real possibility for the U.S. and Israel to join forces and take that military action against the terror group?
I mean, it certainly is a real possibility, and the fact that we're hearing this from the senior leadership, the top leadership of the U.S., the upper echelons, indicates that it is even more realistic. And we've seen, just this last week, we saw the Israeli Air Force and the U.S. Air Force enacting joint operations, training operations. So, we know that this capability exists. We know that the militaries of both countries stand at the ready with the capability to take joint action, whether it be against Hamas, of course, whether it be against the theocratic regime in Iran. These possibilities are real and ready. And under the current administration from the US, we have seen that willingness to say that this could happen in the near future. Now, again, there's so many moving parts here and so many elements that remain yet to be determined whether Hamas will indeed come to the negotiating table and release the hostages, as they must do. But should that not happen, and of course, when you're making deals with the devil like Hamas, you must certainly know that the devil doesn't play fair. So it seems that Israel and the US stand ready to do whatever is necessary to keep that pressure on Hamas and to let them know that if they don't come to the negotiating table, they have, to use US President Trump's own words, risk all hell to pay.
There are nearly 60 hostages that do remain in captivity at this point. We're talking about a handful of Americans. I do want to ask, do we know their conditions, their status at this point? Do we know how those Americans are doing?
Yes, we do. So there remain 5 Americans that are being held hostage by Hamas. Unfortunately, as the situation stands right now, Omar Nutra, Itai Khan, and Gadi and Judy Hagai are known to be deceased at this point. Eden Alexander is the only American that is known to be alive up to this point, and is, of course, the key person that America is, and of course, as we all are, fighting to get back amongst that. But as Israel has always said from the beginning, we will not tolerate anyone being left behind, be they alive or murdered by Hamas. All hostages must be returned. All 59 must come back in order to be able to move forward and see for any sort of future for Gaza and its people. So that is just so absolutely critical. We do hope and pray that Eden Alexander can come home alive and well. But for the others, they must be able to have their bodies brought home so their families can lay them to rest. That is just an absolute a condition that cannot be accepted in any other way.
And what you're looking at are photos of American Eden Alexander, who you were just talking about. His family, his parents, are going to join us here in just a little over an hour to talk a little bit more about his story, their story, and the situation in general, as he is the only American at this point that, as you mentioned, is known to be alive. Asher Westrop Evans, thank you so much for taking the time to join us here and provide some more context on all of this. Is there anything else that you want to add here before I let you go?
I just really want to add that, we've been speaking a lot about the US-Israel relation here, but it's for leaders around the world and for everyone out there who's listening, who wants to see an end to this conflict, who wants to see the hostages returned and wants to see any semblance of peace. Keep the pressure on your leaderships. Let your countries know that Hamas must be pressured from all sides in order to return the hostages, to bring them back home so we can get to some sort of peace, not just for the people of Israel, but as I said, also for the people of Gaza and the wider Middle East as a whole.
Asher, thank you again for taking the time to join us this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.